On the morning of August 12, 1968, at precisely 6:15 a.m., Donald MacLeod stood at the edge of the River Garry in the highland village of Garva Bridge, watching mist rise off water that had separated his community for 187 years. 52 years old, blacksmith, chairman of the village council, he held a surveyor's transit borrowed from a retired civil engineer in Inverness. Across 40 yards of rushing water, he could see the Johnston's farm, a quarter-mile away by foot if you could cross directly 4.5 miles by the only legal route that wound through the valley. The county had rejected their bridge proposal for the 5th time in 3 years. MacLeod lowered the transit and made a decision that would change everything. Garva Bridge sat in the Central Highlands. Population 247. Established in 1781 as a way station on the military road system General Wade had built decades earlier, the original stone bridge, 16 feet wide, 3 arches spanning 65 feet, had collapsed in the winter floods of 1879. No one had died, but the structure crumbled into the river over the course of one February night when ice dams upstream broke loose. The county promised reconstruction. Time equals 500 milliseconds/. They surveyed the site in 1880, then again in 1881. The Great War came and went. The Depression. Another war. By 1968, the village had been waiting 89 years. The river wasn't particularly wide. Spring melt pushed it to perhaps 50 yards across, but most of the year it ran between 35 and 45 yards, depth varying from 2 to 6 feet depending on rainfall in the Goliath Mountains to the south. Fordable in summer by someone willing to risk cold water and slick stones. Deadly in winter when snowmelt turned it into a torrent, carrying debris from upstream timber. Operations. 3 children had drowned attempting crossings between 1920 and 1951. After the 3rd death, Andrew Morrison, age 12, swept away trying to retrieve a football in March 1951. The county installed warning signs and made unauthorized crossing a finable offense. The official detour added 4.2 miles to any journey requiring a crossing. Farmers on the east bank had to drive their cattle through Newtonmore to reach market in Kingussy, turning a 35-minute direct journey into a 3-hour ordeal. The village school sat on the west bank, families on the east. Sent children on a bus that took 40 minutes to cover what should have been a 5-minute walk. The doctor in Kingussy charged extra for house calls to East Bank residents because of the additional travel time. The post office refused delivery to 3 farms entirely, forcing residents to collect mail in person. MacLeod had first approached the county council in 1965. He brought a petition with 189 signatures, every adult in the village, and 37 people from surrounding farms. The council's response came 4 months later. A bridge would cost £47,000, money not available in the current budget. Time equals 600 milliseconds/. Perhaps they could reconsider in 1968. MacLeod wrote back asking if the village could construct something temporary. The county's solicitor replied that any structure over navigable water required formal approval, environmental assessment, engineering certification, and compliance with the Roads Act of 1920. Estimated timeline for approvals, 18 to 24 months. Estimated cost for the approval process alone, £3,200. The village council met in February 1966 in the back room of MacLeod's smithy, 6 men sitting around a work table still covered in iron filings. Thomas Sinclair, the retired engineer who'd moved to Garva Bridge in 1963, spread out a hand-drawn plan. He'd worked on Bailey bridges during the war, modular steel structures the military used to span rivers in combat zones. The Mark III Bailey could be assembled by hand, required no cranes, supported up to 40 tons. Sinclair estimated they could build a simplified version for under £2,000 if they salvaged materials and did the labor themselves. MacLeod asked the obvious question: what would the county do? Sinclair shrugged. By the time they noticed and processed the paperwork to order demolition, the thing would be built and in use. Time equals 550 milliseconds / hard to tear down a bridge that school children were walking across. They started small. Spring 1966, MacLeod and 4 others drove to a salvage yard outside Glasgow, 146 miles south. They bought 24 steel I-beams, each 20 feet long, 12 inches deep, taken from a demolished factory in Motherwell. Cost, £340. They rented a lorry for £25 and spent 2 days hauling the beams north in 3 trips. The steel sat in MacLeod's yard covered by tarps for 7 months, while Sinclair refined his design and they accumulated additional materials, timber decking from a dismantled barn, bolts and rivets bought quietly from different suppliers so no single purchase would draw attention, cable wire from a mining equipment dealer in Fort William. By January 1967, they had most of what they needed. The plan was straightforward: build timber cribs on both banks, sink them into the riverbed to create stable foundations, then span the gap with the I-beams arranged in a truss pattern, bolt on crossbeams, lay the decking, add railings. Sinclair calculated load capacity at 12 tons, sufficient for farm vehicles and the village's single fire engine. The design included a slight arch to shed water and accommodate the river's spring rise. Width 10 feet, wide enough for 1 vehicle with pedestrian space. No lighting, no painted lines, no amenities. Purely functional. MacLeod called a village meeting on January 29, 1967. 83 people showed up, packing the community hall until people stood along the walls. He laid out the situation plainly. The county wasn't going to build this bridge in their lifetimes. They could continue waiting, or they could act. The project would technically be illegal. Anyone who participated could face fines. The bridge might be demolished, but it might not. And even if it stood for only a few months before the county tore it down, they'd have proven it could be done, proven that £47,000 wasn't necessary. They contacted every newspaper within 200 miles. The Highland News sent a photographer on August 27th. His pictures, grainy black and white shots of children crossing the bridge, elderly residents who'd waited decades finally able to visit neighbors, ran on the front page August 29th with the headline, "Village Defies County, Builds Own Bridge." The Scotsman picked it up August 31st. The Glasgow Herald ran a feature September 2nd. BBC Scotland sent a television crew September 5th. The County Council met again September 10th, 5 days before the scheduled demolition. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Councilors faced an impossible situation: enforce the law and look like bullies tearing down a community's achievement, or legitimize illegal construction and set a precedent. They chose a middle path. The demolition was postponed pending a full engineering inspection. If the bridge met safety standards, the county would consider retroactive approval. If it failed, removal would proceed. The inspection took place September 18th. 2 civil engineers from a firm in Edinburgh spent 6 hours examining every joint, every beam, every bolt. They checked the foundation depth, measured load deflection, reviewed Sinclair's calculations, tested the concrete. Their 27-page report concluded the bridge met or exceeded requirements for its classification. The design was unorthodox but sound. The materials, though salvaged, were adequate. The construction quality was remarkable given the constraints. They recommended weight restrictions, maximum 7.5 tons. Time equals 400 milliseconds greater than slash and installation of warning signs, but found no grounds for demolition. The County Council voted November 3, 1968. By a margin of 11-4, they granted retroactive approval for the bridge with the condition that the village assume all liability and maintenance responsibilities. MacLeod signed the agreement November 7th. The bridge became officially legal 87 days after completion. The Garva Bridge stayed in service for 41 years. The village maintained it, replacing decking planks as they weathered, repainting the railings every 3 years, inspecting the structure after every spring flood. In 2009, the Highland Council finally allocated funds for a modern replacement, a single-span steel structure with LED lighting, wider lanes, higher weight capacity. The old bridge came down in March 2009. Some of the I-beams were saved and installed as a memorial in the village square, a rusted monument to what people can accomplish when government fails them. Donald MacLeod died in 1994, age 78, having crossed his bridge an estimated 9,000 times. Thomas Sinclair lived until 2001, age 89, and gave occasional lectures on guerrilla civil engineering at Scottish universities. The village's population had declined to 203 by 2010, but the community survived largely because the bridge had prevented the isolation that killed so many other small Highland settlements. The precedent had consequences. Between 1969 and 1975, 7 other Scottish communities built unauthorized infrastructure, bridges, culverts, road improvements, after being ignored by county authorities. 4 were retroactively approved. 2 were demolished. 1 is still in legal limbo. The practice became common enough that the Scottish Parliament amended infrastructure laws in 1998, creating an expedited approval process for community-built projects under certain value thresholds. The bridge MacLeod and his neighbors built for £1,847 became a case study in civil engineering programs, taught not for its technical innovation, but for its social context. What happens when technical knowledge, community will, and bureaucratic failure intersect? The county's original estimate of £47,000 was later revealed to have included £23,000 in consultant fees and £8,000 in administrative costs. The actual construction, had the county done it, would have cost around £16,000. The village's approach proved that the engineering was the easy part. The hard part was deciding that waiting for permission was a luxury they could no longer afford. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about communities that refused to wait, that built what they needed with their own hands, that proved ordinary people can solve their own problems when government won't. Real people. Real defiance. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if you've ever seen your community do something like this. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Donald MacLeod and the people of Garva Bridge don't disappear into silence. These builders deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.